Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I have someone on my channel for the first time that I've been watching for a good while. Really been loving the content, really loving the whole kind of altruistic vibe that you're building in your community. Just the goodness that I sense coming from a lot of your videos and your personality. So here is Crypto Kindness, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise, Ben. I appreciate you reaching out, asking me to jump on your channel. I'm always flattered when people do that. And I've watched a bit of your content. I think you have a really interesting perspective coming kind of from the VC world and how all that works. So I'm excited to learn from you today.
Absolutely, man. Well, I mean, much the same as I did in my first live stream. I mean, I'm more than happy to give you a little bit of context to really the lens that I'm looking through things at.
Sure.
I come from very much a traditional background. Some of you watching this may remember from a previous video, but graduated law school, ended up going into finance, was trading in London for a good while for Merrill Lynch. Then kind of got gravitated towards all things VC in Cupertino. So my first introduction to the US, and I ended up staying because I liked it so much. But I was then a VC working for two VC firms actually during my tenure out there, really focused on innovation and tech. You know, two massive areas. Around the same time, Web 2 was really coming to fruition. A lot of software as a service type platforms. A lot of technologies that now in hindsight share a lot of the same synergies with crypto projects. You know, it's a lot of the same fundamentals are in play. And then, you know, fast forward years, now I'm in a completely different role. I have a public relations firm, and I do some other stuff as well. But essentially, I think that the lens in which I look through a lot of the crypto landscape really comes from my time both in traditional finance and through that VC lens. So hopefully, I mean, the idea behind this channel is really to bring that somewhat of a unique lens and to really kind of pull down the veil a little bit as to how a lot of these institutions, a lot of these VC groups tend to look at these projects. And you know, it's important as well, and forgive me if I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but even last year, you know, the last 12 to 18 months, there was about 40 billion in VC funding coming into crypto, which, you know, probably is only about 5% of total VC funds, but it's still a huge chunk of change, which I only see growing as we go forward. And it's just been interesting. It's been interesting seeing the kind of plays that they're making. And my whole thing really is to try to simplify it, right? Position that same mindset so that someone who's a retail investor like you and I, you know, the small fish out there who are able to really try to look through that same lens and ultimately use that as another guidance system to making some good investments and some good choices. Sure.
Important to know, current small fish, soon to be whale. So just, you know, gotta get that.
You're not wrong at all. No, and that's good, man. And for me, I mean, and those who are, you know, if you happen to be already familiar with some of the content that I put out, a big focus right now on specifically HEX, but also the PulseChain, PulseX community, and when that, those huge catalysts, when this whole ecosystem comes to fruition, I think that, you know, sometimes for me, the writing really is on the wall. And I've been in various instances throughout my life that have been very lucrative financially for me, in different realms, different areas, crypto being one of them. But I'd say that the same flags, the same, you know, kind of analysis takes place. And when the writing is on the wall and the blueprint is in place, it's not too difficult to see. Once you kind of take out all the intimidation factors that a lot of people have when coming into crypto, the various degrees of technical analysis, yes, these are all important things, but you can really simplify that whole process and then look through things, you know, through that kind of more of a common sense lens sometimes. And sometimes it just adds up. I think that, you know, for me, certainly, I'm not afraid of communicating how bullish I am about something if I actually have the conviction and the confidence about it. I think that, you know, and much the same as I've seen, you know, I'm sure that you've seen, where you do see a lot of people, publicly speaking at least, that seem to be sitting on the fence and kind of weighing up all the options, which of course is a wise thing to do. I think that, you know, a lot of people watching that, it's often an echo of their own, you know, weighing up. But I think there's probably more value, or at least from me anyway, my opinion is that there's a little bit more value perhaps in speaking in more kind of convictional terms about something you either love or you hate. And I think that, you know, it's up to everyone listening. You know, of course, we say it all the time, but we're not financial advisors. I think that anyone listening has to do that due diligence and weigh up all these contrasting viewpoints to make the best decision for them.
For sure. So one question I have, which I've been curious about, and maybe you've said this on a video or two before and I didn't catch it, but PulseChain was a big deal, I guess, a year and a half ago or a little bit more. And a lot of people started channels, myself included, at that time period. But the noise has kind of bled out. Obviously, we're in the bear market towards the bottom, if not just kind of rounding back up. The excitement, the enthusiasm isn't there. How did you get into PulseChain now? How is it that you're starting a PulseChain-ish channel now? In today's
So this is an interesting topic, and I'll tell you, and it's going to require me speaking a little bit more. But so throughout my life, and this is something I also touched on a previous video, but it really is a message I want everyone to kind of pay heed to. I've had, I guess, just due to the nature of what I've done in the past, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my network have usually been older people who have been, various levels of success, some of which very successful within their career path. And we all have friends from different walks of life. So my network was kind of work colleagues and work folks and clients and all of that stuff. My friendship group was obviously someone you like to unwind with, and they're high school friends, they're college friends, they're coming from all walks of life. And so it was very interesting during the last bull cycle specifically, but maybe even slightly before that. I witnessed this transfer of wealth in real time right in front of me that you hear a lot of people speaking about. And it's often, very difficult to assimilate properly to that kind of mind frame when you hear about it and you hear that this big transfer of wealth is coming, and it's an exciting thing to hear. But I think until you're up close to it, I knew so many folks who have worked their ass off their entire life, the traditional way. They went to school, they did everything they were supposed to do. And they made, for most of us, relatively speaking, would be a lot of money. Right. And I also know a lot of people who were perhaps a little bit more on the edge, a bit of a fringe mentality where it comes to, they did okay. And I'm talking, they're average Joes. I mean, they weren't poor, they weren't rich. They were kind of right there in the middle, like the majority of us out there. And so, seeing them turn what was essentially, a very modest amount of money. And I'm talking, maybe $5,000-$10,000, which I know to a lot of us may seem like a lot of money, but if you work hard, if you even get a part-time job, you can put that much away if you really put your mind to it. And I saw them turn that into, some of them tens of millions, some of them hundreds of millions. And it's an eye-opener when, you think that you're in certain networks that, have disposable income. And then people that people that you have known for a long, long time, they're flying you around in helicopters and you're there kind of in real time, just soaking it in. It's a big eye opener. And it's, and I'm not new to crypto, and I'm not sure how much you know about me from previous videos, but my entry into crypto was almost around inception, really. I mean, that's probably a strong word. I'd say as soon as Ethereum was around 30 cents. So for a lot of us, that seems to be the beginning when I wasn't in the ICOs or anything like that. But then, I got lucky with my initial buy, sold out way too prematurely. I mean, I didn't put enough in because it was a leap of faith at that time. We didn't have such a tenure. Cycles didn't exist. It was literally just, wow, this new crypto thing just made me money, celebrate. In hindsight, if I kept that, it would have been fantastic. So I didn't really make any kind of money from that, really. And then I've been involved in crypto at various degrees. I mean, I ended up buying into a crypto farm in another country. So I bought a ton of machines from China, had them, and I was mining Bitcoin and Ethereum for a couple of months. I touched on this in a previous video too. It didn't really go to plan. I ended up losing the effectiveness of those machines, and the government took my machines away. But the lesson that I learned and the context that I want to bring to everyone isn't just, I know people who are rich. I know people who just simply bought into a project or projects that they had confidence in. They assessed the fundamentals for what where they thought it was going, and they held. And if I had held in, a ton of different instances, I'd be in a very different situation now. And so this last bull run is real motivation behind starting a channel, because I have seen kind of both sides of the fence. I've seen what happens when you go to school and you try to really work hard and go down that traditional path. And then I see people who are taking advantage of this revolution right now, the crypto revolution that has taken place, and they've leapfrogged. They've jumped everyone because they had the foresight to get involved in something that was perhaps a little more risky to the traditional heads out there.
Wow, that's really cool.
It is, and it's painful, but it's also cool. you learn from it, and I think as long as you're equipping yourself and we're educated now, this is perfect timing. I mean, anyone.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah,
it's just a matter of paying attention, and the next time around, instead of saying "I wish I had" and that'll never happen to me, say, "Teach me. What'd you do?
Exactly.
How can this be done again?" Like, what blows my mind is the amount of people that still think that the opportunity is past. Like, oh, that happened, that's gone, that's done, it's dead. And like, I'll never have that type of money. That'll never happen to me. It's all about mindset. And I see so many people failing the mindset game. And I don't say that as like, I've got it all figured out. I catch myself getting negative sometimes, and I catch myself saying stupid things. But the important thing is I catch myself. And then I'm like, oh, that's dumb. Why would I even plant that seed? Like, I want to plant seeds of the harvest that I wish to reap, not of the harvest that I don't want to have. So there's still plenty of opportunity. Like, if you just look at HEX, for example, we know what's coming. It doesn't even take a little bit of intelligence to know what's coming. So if you're just dollar cost averaging into HEX, you're going to have 10x more of your fiat
at least
like a year. It's a no-brainer.
It really is. And you know what, you're right, and something you touched on earlier in terms of the excitement levels dampening a little bit just due to the delays that have taken place. In my opinion, those delays are a godsend. I mean, some people believe he's not timing the market. For Howie test purposes, sure. This guy Richard Hart is very, very good at doing what he does, right? And he looks through a macro lens as well. We know he's not a developer. I mean, yeah, sure, he has the skill set and the intelligence to kind of compute what is going on there, I guess. But he never professes himself to be anything but a smart person who's able to kind of read the market somewhat. I mean, his version of technical analysis is I'm sure very different to most, but it's important what you say about reminding yourself, because while these delays are happening, and while you start seeing some of the negative comments, and it isn't even that you believe those negative FUD comments that people are making, it's just analyzing the sentiment in the moment can be enough to kind of set you down that somewhat of a negative spiral. But, and I think reminding it's easy for us because we've been, in this mindset for a little while, but simply understanding that it's a very likely situation where a lot of people who are involved in a HEX or got involved in the sacrifices or intend to get into that ecosystem specifically, and there are other ecosystems, sure. But while you're intending to get into this ecosystem, relatively early speaking, when it launches and any buying opportunities thereafter, this could be one of the biggest opportunities that we've had in a generation. And this is coming from someone who spent a long time trading, a long time analyzing VC. I'm telling you, I've got a lot of things going on in my life right now. I'm about to open another restaurant, right? This should be something that I'm super excited about. I'm more excited about this ecosystem launching because the writing is on the wall. And very few assets, no assets, are going to be able to keep up with crypto. They haven't been. And
I got a question for you.
What's that?
I said, I got an important question for you then.
Sure. What
is the opportunity cost for the money that you're putting into this new restaurant if you were to put it into crypto right now?
Well, it's you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's
sorry to rub that in because I know you've thought about it.
No, I definitely have. And you know what? I mean, and the ironic thing is this was an opportunity or an investment that I went into after being made aware and fully convicted on the selling points of this whole ecosystem. So I think that the difference being, I mean, we'll talk about hedging, and it's a very weird kind of conversational point for me, because on the one hand, common sense would dictate, and this is something that I've just recently done. Common sense would dictate that you want to hedge yourself, right? You want to put your fingers into a couple of different pies, get a couple of different revenue avenues in place, revenue streams, something that I've believed in my whole life. And maybe that's just the somewhat of an indoctrination that I've kind of undergone, but it's true. And usually it's for people who already have money to kind of maintain that in the most safe manner possible. On the other hand, part of my message, and this is kind of an unorthodox message too, when it comes to folks who are a bit more modest in terms of their income. We have a lot of very young people, old people who haven't had too many breaks in life watching a lot of our content. And so the hope that they get from some of these projects, well-deserved hope, should make it clear that while it's important to be, do your fundamental research and get involved in these projects at the right time, you have to take somewhat of a leap of faith for it to really make a generational impact on your wealth, right? And I'm using that term again, generational wealth. It's all relative. For some, 10,000, 100,000, a million. Everyone has different levels of what's going to be, on their wish list in terms of a return. But talking about opportunity cost, I mean, it's a very true factor because, undoubtedly, if you believe in something, Warren Buffett mentality, if you are focused in your convictions and you don't kind of delegate too much or you don't compartmentalize your investment strategy too much, that's where you make the most money. So it's like, you have to take a leap of faith. You have to get to those uncomfortable levels, which it is uncomfortable. In order to put the right money in to achieve your financial goal, you kind of work your way backwards from the number of X's you need. It may take Uber driving. It may take a paper route. It may take some part-time job that gives you a little bit more disposable income that you can invest, because in order to get those returns, it is an opportunity cost. Money in your bank right now is not a good play. But not being a financial advisor, it's a hard truth for some people to swallow, right? I hope that makes sense.
That's the reason why I started the YouTube channel. I was like, okay, if I put myself out there, I'm going to force myself to learn more. I'm going to interview people that know more and can teach me. And if I do it right, it'll generate a little bit of a revenue stream that I can then funnel back into what I've been learning the entire time. And so far, that's working well. I think, ask me in 3 years if it worked well. We'll see. And that's the beauty of it. It's just like, okay, we'll see. Like, it's a small.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it will.
I think so.
I think, and it's hard. It's hard because we're always cognizant. Me, freshly new to YouTube, you've built quite a following now for good reason. I think that we're always going to be cognizant of not giving bad advice, which sounds obvious, but not advising anyone to jump into a deep end into something that may bankrupt them, right? May cut away their legs. So it's on everyone to be kind of responsible. But also, you do have to weigh that up with getting involved to a level that is actually going to move the needle for you. And it's tough and that's why I think that, it is valuable for us to actually convey our conviction and our confidence about certain things that we believe will have a real big impact on ourselves. And it's also on the viewer, on the listener to do their own due diligence and weigh up the opposing arguments too, right?
Yeah, listen, you bring up a really good point that I think is necessary to be discussed, because there is to use the term opportunity risk. Again, there's an opportunity risk or cost on either side of everything you do, especially if you're making content on YouTube. And I'll just use the example. I don't want to talk about this, but I'm going to use this as an example, then we'll go away from it. But I'm going to use the example of Zen. I am very curious about that. I was curious about it. I wanted to learn about it. And of course, there's people that are highly adamant that it's a scam, it's stupid, the tokenomics, everything are dumb. But there's two sides. I'm putting on my channel, I'm putting on education, I'm doing interviews, and I say to everybody, I could be wrong. I'm happy to say I could be wrong. This isn't gospel, it's not written in stone, but I would rather take a small chance and be wrong than not take a chance at all and be wrong and it went up. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna educate myself, and I'm gonna share with people, like, this is brand new, we don't know where it's gonna go. But what I would say to the people that sit back and say, no, that's dumb, no, you can't do that, don't listen to this person, don't follow that, this is an idiot, I know everything based on today's information is right. That person can do just as much damage by telling people not to get into it if it does 1,000x.
Totally agree.
So it's like, okay, I get it. You might disagree with me and you might say it's stupid, but everything you're saying is based on knowledge we have today. We don't know what's coming tomorrow. And so
I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I'm taking the small position of, I'm going to learn about it. And I'm going to learn about it in public so others can see what I'm doing, what I'm learning, the mistakes I'm making, because that's going to happen. And it's a small risk. And I've done my best to say that. People will say whatever they want to say. I don't really care. But I would rather put in $1,000, $2,000, whatever somebody's comfortable with, knowing that it could go to zero. But I took the chance and I learned something along the ways, than to immediately just like, no, it's a scam, it's stupid, it's dumb, based on this information, and then be wrong.
They were saying the same thing about HEX.
Yeah, well, exactly, saying the same thing wrong. I mean, how many people just wrote HEX off from day one, stupid, and they just sat there and watched everybody else become millionaires? because they made decisions based on the box that they live within. And until you get outside of your comfort zone, you don't really learn anything anyway. So just, that's kind of where I stand with the whole YouTube thing. Is I could be wrong. I could be wrong on everything. But I tell my viewers, I am a debt-free person. I follow Dave Ramsey. If you're living beyond your means, take care of your finances first, and then only invest with what you can afford to lose. And recognize that in crypto, you could very well lose everything, and just make decisions based on that. But don't listen to any one person. That's it. Like, one guy doesn't have all the answers. And I certainly will be happy to say, I don't have all the answers.
You don't? Why are you on the channel then? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And by the way, I'm not opposed to talking about Zen at all. I think, firstly, that for anyone listening, it's important to keep an open mind with everything, especially when Zen's Layer 1 comes out. I think that may even bring a new narrative, a new sentiment along with it, that you have to stay relevant with this stuff. Like you said, you can't make decisions now that are going to be, even likely in a year, 2 years, 3 years, because especially in crypto, the landscape changes very quickly. You learn the same thing in finance, albeit at a slower pace, probably.
Sure.
With finance, it's more like macro events. It's more stuff that, especially with Fortune 500s or a lot of that blue chip, stock, that they move with bigger catalysts, right? And both externally and internally. With crypto, not so much. I think with something like a Zen, where it's a relatively small community in comparison to, a Bitcoin, Ethereum, of course. Right. I think that a narrative can change going forward too. So anyone being completely maxied out of their minds and sticking to their one lane, pigeonholing themselves, is definitely going to do themselves a disservice. And it's interesting because I think I watched your first ever video when it came out, and it was fantastic. I think you were analyzing kind of the difference between layer 1s and DEXs, and kind of the potential impact on price, which was a fresh take on it. And I think that, and you were very clear in outlining the fact that you weren't yet an expert, but this kind of makes sense to you. And so you were asking for others to give you their 2 cents. And I've seen your progression really, and I've learned along with you for a lot of that, where you've become more and more knowledgeable about this whole area. And I think that you touch on something very, very important: education, going through the ringer, having this be somewhat of a litmus test in terms of a brand new project coming out, something that is in a new ecosystem, so to speak. It's generated, it's in the process of having its own kind of fully fledged ecosystem too. Well, that's an interesting, that's like going to school, right? You're able to mint it for free. And so going to school and seeing how that plays out seems to me like something worthwhile doing, even if it doesn't really achieve the revenue you want. Hopefully it does, but if it doesn't get any of that the revenue side of things, I think the learning process alone is invaluable information. I think anyone following your channel and going along with that gets to learn that too, me included. And so props for that. I know the channel may have taken some slack, as usually it does when someone jumps from one ecosystem to the, or not jumps, but is inclusive of.
Yeah, heaven forbid we be inclusive, right?
And it's slack that's unfounded. But I think those people too, eventually they will go through that learning curve and understand that it pays off to be open-minded. And I think you're right. The opportunity cost of not making someone aware of something like that could way outweigh the being wrong about it. It's up to, again, the viewer to make the whoever's listening to make an intelligent decision on how much they want to actually invest. And it's, and understand it's a chance.
It's a chance. And the farther you go away from the blue chips in crypto, the bigger that risk profile gets. But also the bigger the asymmetric bet gets, in the sense that, you could put $1,000 in Ethereum today and you'll probably get a 10x. You could put $1,000 into HEX today and you could probably get 100x. And you could probably put $1,000 into PulseChain when it launches and get 1,000x. But the farther you go away from established and into newer coins, newer projects that could have bugs, that could have issues, not saying anything about PulseChain, of course, but that risk profile gets a lot higher, but so does the return. So it's just a matter of do what works for you and whatever.
Totally. Yeah. And again, you're bringing up good points. And I think that, with the reason that I'm so interested right now, vested, I'm very gung-ho about the whole Richard Hart ecosystem right now. Yeah. Is because we've had a very strong litmus test. HEX has proven to be a very strong litmus test. And a lot of the things and the indicators that we look through traditional finance, through VC funding, really in and around leadership, right? It's a leader who is very present, who seems to be very smart, is gaining a community who trusts him. And so that's half the battle. then, typically speaking, we may look at like the team. Well, it's difficult in crypto because often we don't see much of the team. The teams that already have that, their teams on the website are probably going down the avenue most of the time of a centralized format, which is peeling away a little bit from the unique selling points we love so much about HEX. But I would always say, or PulseChain even, and I want to be clear as well. I was made aware of HEX through PulseChain. And then came to find out that some of my friends who had actually done very well were involved in HEX after the fact. But great friends, right? But thanks for the heads up, folks. But now, like you said, it's right there. I mean, I've done so many videos, or so many, relatively speaking to how many videos in total I've put out. But a lot of my focus has been on HEX because it's a no-brainer right now.
It's a no-brainer.
And I think the community and other things, we might not have a team that Richard Hart is leveraging that we're able to have full visibility with, but the community is the team right now. And that leads into this whole narrative going forward of decentralized, exchanges, decentralized formats and vehicles being extremely important. We've just seen, Kraken, Gemini being fined. We've seen FTX collapsing and all of that stuff. Do you think that this next bull cycle, when people are coming in, the selling points of this decentralized world that everyone's been screaming from the mountaintops in the HEX and the PulseChain community, there's a lot more opportunity for people to understand that now. Sometimes you have to get stung in order to truly understand how important these things are. And I think that this whole thing is pushing real heavily into that strong positive narrative for this ecosystem going forward. And the reason I bring that up is because you mentioned, the waylaying of products being released. It could be a godsend because it's allowed these things to come to fruition in that time frame, and it's giving us more ammunition on top of all the unique selling points of the ecosystem we're already aware of. And these external factors probably will mean that there's a bigger understanding, a bigger education, and therefore probably a lot more economic energy going into this going forward, meaning that not just PulseChain and PulseX are going to kind of hopefully explode out of the gates and go parabolic in the next couple of years, but HEX too, because there's so much excitement. And I'm not sure. Did you watch the stream with Crypto7 and Johnny Chaos? I think I mentioned that in a previous video. He was talking about the notion of liquidity bonding between HEX, between PulseChain, PulseX, and really what that can mean going forward, and how economic energy into the new shiny objects can also dramatically pull up existing HEX, as well as PHEX as well. And so even that adds a lot more. I guess, trust when it comes to mid and long-term returns on HEX as well, which I wasn't even on the top of my mind. I think that I'd mentioned this, but Johnny Chaos, much like a K4K, does a real good job of unearthing a lot of hidden value propositions that at first glance, a lot of us would probably miss. And then in hindsight, it always looks like, it was obvious to us. And that for me was a great way of thinking about it. I'm just curious if you'd seen that, but it's this whole notion of liquidity bonding, I think will continue to gather momentum as well.
The biggest challenge with crypto is it's impossible to stay up on everything. Like, how many people are putting out great content and you're just like, okay, yeah, did you see that? No, I didn't see that. Did you see that? No, I didn't see that. I was watching this. Like, oh my gosh, you can't stay up on everything. It's borderline infuriating. You could drive yourself crazy.
It is. And you know what? Even just by highlighting that, it's already kind of lowering the gates a little bit to those who do think it's a little bit intimidating, because it doesn't have to be. I mean, you only got so much information at your disposal. It's one of the reasons I try to keep my videos so short and to the point, because, I think there are probably two useful forms of or perceived usefulness to video formats. One is something like this, where it's a bit more of an open dialogue and maybe a little bit longer. The other format maybe comes down to being more direct and to the point. And so somebody coming in, the more you're able to make that digestible, and there's no reason we shouldn't be able to. It's not rocket science. We have, people of all walks of life involved in crypto and doing very well out of it potentially, in the future. They're making all the same decisions as some of the older, finance gurus out there. Yeah. And it's great because I've witnessed this firsthand. Some of the folks that I've known for a long time, usually the traders, and they work for some of the biggest institutions in the world. But when you hear them talk about crypto, they're as clueless as a newbie coming in for the first time. And so everyone should know that, there's no hidden barrier sometimes to all the people that know about this kind of stuff and all the people that don't. It's literally just, we're in a space right now where you can watch a video and know more than a lot of these guys who are heavy into traditional stocks.
Hey, the guy that got me into crypto, He's been in since, I don't know, 2014 or something like that. And he'll call me up every now and again and be like, hey, can you help me with this? And I'm like, what?
Is this the kind?
What's that?
Is this the kindness whale that I've heard you refer to in previous videos?
Yeah.
It's super interesting. Again, I'm not just saying this. I have watched a lot of your videos. I think it's great. And so you mentioned in one of your videos that the kindness whale was kind of explaining to you, or at least asking, hey, if you had X amount of returns through a pulse chain, would this, if whatever it was, half of what the perceived kind of, or the expected from some people return, the 5,000x or the 2,000, even a 1,000x, would this make significant impacts on your income? And you're like, yeah. He's like, well, it's going to happen. I was already kind of well into kind of my whole belief system in this ecosystem when I heard that, and I couldn't agree more. I've seen it happen with other projects too. I have friends make money on Algorand, on Cardano, Uniswap, like all the names that were. What's that?
It just doesn't even matter. I mean, anything that just has a good market fit based on what crypto needs today, it's gonna do well.
The writing, the writing is on the wall for all of this stuff.
So tell me, what are you most excited about PulseChain? We haven't gotten to that. I mean, you told me about what you see with HEX and some of your friends, but you're making a lot of your content surrounding PulseChain. So give me like a 2 minutes Cliff's Notes about why Ben is so excited about PulseChain.
Well, so firstly, I mean, there are all the obvious reasons that most people have touched on, right? I think that it is a chain. It's coming at the right time in terms of, scaling back on really the facilities of using it. It's going to be faster and cheaper, right? Hopefully. Two things that especially in a bull market are going to make a lot of difference in, the NFT markets or in other kind of heavy demographics within the crypto world. It's going to make facilitation of those things a lot easier. And we've already seen a huge amount of interest in mostly generated by the huge kind of cult following we have. It's not a bad thing. Culture is everything. And so seeing that excitement and all the new projects that are kind of looking to come out, I think that's the obvious indicators that a lot of people are touching on. I'll say this, right? And I talk a lot about institutional interest. Now, maybe something that is a little different to think about, aside from what we hear time and time again. I mentioned earlier the huge kind of amount of money coming into crypto from VCs in particular. And I use VCs because I think that a lot of those will work. And VCs, I'll club together some investment arms of, big institutional banks, maybe some corporations as well. These are all kind of operating along the same lines. A lot of them have their own, quote unquote VC arms there as well that do their investing for them. Now, there's about 40 billion that was invested the last 12 to 18 months. The majority of that, revenue-wise, went into really like trading, lending platforms, as you would imagine. And that's a bit of a double-edged sword, obviously, with this whole decentralization narrative coming out. But also knowing that there's a reason why traditional markets operate around a centralized format, because the VCs want to be in early, they want to take the majority of the control and all of that good stuff. But then, the secondary kind of, or I should say the majority of the investments, so not necessarily the amount of revenue, but the majority of projects that were invested in really fell into Web3, fell into gaming, it fell into, I'm trying to think, like the NFT space. And so these, I think, are going to have a much bigger narrative going forward in future bull markets, right? We know AI is coming around the corner, certainly in terms of some impressive, projects, hopefully, that come to market. The metaverse, that's already taken a lot of investment. I think that the opportunity with PulseChain being very fast, being quick to adopt, and hopefully a lot easier to develop on, just because it's going to make it cheaper and easier for everyone, really, looking at things from a kind of a bird's eye. I think that as that institutional investment changes, or I should say, as that VC investment mentality changes to, okay, the writing's on the wall in terms of kind of how these centralized exchanges are playing out. Let's kind of sidestep a lot of the SEC involvement in some of this stuff. And let's start investing in projects that also see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to developing on, whether it be an NFT platform, whether it be, a metaverse kind of vehicle, or, any of these topics. I mean, I think that PulseChain is positioning itself very, very nicely to be up, running, already have gone through a vetting process, really, when it comes to HEX. The leader's already brought out, we've gone through a litmus test with HEX. Aside from price appreciation and all of that good stuff, it's still been around. It's still worked. And I think that, that trust factor means a lot when it comes to looking at, the network effect of the blockchain you're going to build on, which I think we have in place, and also the ease and the scalability of that platform as it starts growing. And I know I'm being pretty sporadic in my thought process here, but ultimately, in a nutshell, I think that a lot of this VC funding, this large chunks of institutional money will come in, even if it's indirectly, to PulseChain. And this isn't to say also that, we may start seeing direct purchasing from a lot of this stuff too, as we, much the same as they hold Ethereum bags, much the same as they're probably holding HEX, or they'll continue to hold HEX, and Bitcoin, right? As that, and I'm talking maybe not just this cycle, the following cycles to come. And that's part of my kind of algorithm too, right? I want to see how the longevity of these things. But I think that the selling points are there for a lot of these institutions to start funding and getting behind platforms built on the blockchain, which in itself is obviously going to, expeditely increase the interaction with the chain. Not to mention PulseX, obviously. I mean, that the way that will interact and being the main exchange. So I think that, like, on top of all the obvious selling points that we've talked about ad nauseum for a lot of other channels, I think that there is a real avenue for some of this larger money to come down the pike. And I think that anyone who potentially looks to sell out of their positions once this initial retail excitement comes into play, and we see this hype cycle, or we see the next cycle go to the levels that we want it to go to, I think they've been making a big mistake by exiting, or at least exiting any large percentage of their holdings, because what's coming down the pike is a lot bigger. And as much as when we're in the ecosystem, when we're in the Richard Hart community, we want to be optimistic, and we want to believe that a lot of this, the trust factor is being built, and is it an Ethereum kind of killer, and all of those buzzwords. There's actually a lot of truth behind that. I mean, Cardano isn't able to do it. I mean, or so far they haven't been able to, and that's already gained a massive following, some real huge price appreciation. Certainly going into its next its second bull market, right? We've heard a lot of people talking about the prices that just gone exponential. We have a better vehicle here, and we have something that's going to be, for me anyway, I'm looking at this in the same lens that I used to look at projects. It's a better vehicle to trust platforms and other vehicles built on top of it. And so that's really what gets me excited. And that was a very long answer to a 2 minutes, but I hope that shed some light on how I'm thinking about things.
Is there anything that you think about that is bullish for that others aren't discussing? Like you said, you come from a different lens. You come from the venture capital kind of view and how you're doing your research. Is there any one particular, and maybe there's not, but is there any one particular thing that has you excited that maybe isn't being discussed out there?
It's tough, because a lot of the things that I do love about this have been discussed, right? It's like the decentralization narrative. It's been around for a while. It's an obvious one, but now for a lot of people, it's making more sense because we've just seen the shenanigans that have taken place with some of these other centralized exchanges. So I wouldn't say there are any, apart from just looking at the indicators and seeing how appealing it looks to bigger money. I don't know if there's anything specific outside of what's being talked about that is compelling enough to come to mind right now. I think that what we already have is a lot of ammunition. I think that even with again, like even discovering new kind of ways of thinking about this, which adds to that ammunition and context with this kind of liquidity bonding and all of that stuff. For HEX, I think that's kind of changed my mindset a little bit. Not changed, it's adapted my mindset. I already see the longer term value of HEX, and how I think we're just seeing the beginning right now. I mean, anyone questioning whether they want to buy right now versus if it dips a little bit, I think it's erroneous. I don't. You're still you weigh up your risks appropriately, right? I mean, make sure you it's all great, especially when it's like low cents amounts. I guess a little dip can mean the difference between a 2x or a 3x. But
well, it did, yeah, it does, man. Yeah. I mean, if you bought it 1.8 cents versus 4.5 cents, that's a big difference.
Absolutely. And if it goes to $1, it's all you're going to regret missing it at 5 cents or 6 cents, right?
Well, and exactly.
And I think that's something I guess to touch on. I know that you mentioned earlier a little bit about your wavering, or many people's wavering kind of excitement levels, as is normal when something takes a little longer to come out. What are your thoughts now in terms of potential price performance, let's say? I mean, I know I've heard you say this a number of times in terms of having a little fun, because that's what it is. I mean, it's having a fun, speculating a little bit on how we think price performance will operate or take form. given the fact that it's been a while since it's been announced and we're still waiting on a lot of things, do you have any changes in mentality, HEX, PulseChain, PulseX, kind of in first year performance, in first cycle performance?
No, I really don't. One of the things that I've learned from asking and interviewing other people that are smarter than me is that the people that seem to be the wisest at this oftentimes aren't the loudest. And I'll give an example of Cosmo Jenkins. I don't know if you've seen him on Twitter or some of his YouTube.
Not familiar yet.
But he's like the HEX TA ninja. This guy, I mean, if you go back and look at all the charts he's drawn out of HEX over the last 2 years, man, if he hasn't nailed just about every one of them, it's like, wow, what are you doing? And I remember when HEX was just on the downside of its all-time high, and people were saying, oh, this is just going to be a 20% pullback, and then it's just going to rip, all the hopium was going. He was the first dude that was like, nah, we're going to see 6 cents HEX. And I was like, what? No way, that's crazy. And then sure enough, guess what? We saw 6 cents HEX. And then we saw $1, a penny 0.8 HEX. And so what I've learned is, if you go to Twitter, if you watch some of these interviews, you hear just kind of, I don't want to say absurd, but way too hopiumistic next cycle for HEX type of stuff. And what I have seen through listening and learning from people that are smarter than me is that there seems to be a thought process that, based on historic performance of other coins that have survived and gone on to have another successful bull run after their first, is that it's a 3 to 4x above their previous all-time high. And if you look at what Jenkins is saying is going to be the case, his TA case for HEX next bull run, it's about $1.80, which is just a tick more than 3x above HEX all-time high. There's another guy, I'm blanking on his name, and I wish I wasn't, because he's super good at the HEX TA stuff too. But he says somewhere around 80 cents to $1. And so the big question becomes, is that $1.80 that Jenkins is talking about, is that the combined price of PHEX and EHEX equaling $1.80, or is it $1.80 on each chain? And then if you look at what the other gentleman is saying, which, I mean, I'm really frustrated that I'm not recalling his name right now, because if I said it, most people that eventually hear this will be like, oh yeah, I know that dude. His statement of 90 or 80 cents to $1, well, if that's 80 cents to $1 per version of HEX, PHEX, and EHEX, then that lines up with what Jenkins is saying, very much so. So they could be kind of symbiotic in what they're predicting. But long way to answer the question is, I'm kind of holding on to the 3 to 4x of the previous all-time high narrative. So my thought process for HEX, and I'm not a TA guy, I just make it a point to pay attention to people that are smarter than me, ask a lot of questions, and then don't think I'm smarter than them. Like, they know they've done it, they've been here. So I'm just going to listen. And so I'm choosing to listen to a 3 to 4x narrative for HEX. The big unknown is, let's say $1.80 is the number. So is it $1.50? Is it $2? Who cares? The big unknown is that per chain, or is that combined, the sum of the two chains? We don't know. Time will tell. I don't really care. Either way, I'm happy.
Either way.
Right. So,
Gonna be all right.
What is $1.80 from now? Let's call it 5 cents. So that's a 35x, give or take, from today's price. Like, why aren't we buying HEX? Why isn't that being talked about? Why are people still calling it a scam? I don't know. PulseChain, Richard said it can do it. Richard said if Ethereum can do a 14,000x, then PulseChain can do a 14,000x. He said HEX was designed to do a 10,000x, and it did it. Ethereum did a 14,000x. PulseChain is a copy of Ethereum with improved everything.
With a ton of projects already lined up to be built on it.
Plus an entire copied system state. Like, there's a huge value to that. So can it do a 14,000x? Well, yeah, why the hell can it? That's it. So is it going to do that in the first run? No. I am not going to say at all that it's going to do it in the first bull run. What can it do in the first bull run? It's just impossible to guess. And I guess the biggest challenge with answering the question is there's too many undefines within the question. What is it going to do? It's going to do 200x. It's going to do 1,000x. Both people that answer that question could be right.
With a very small degree of the effectiveness that comes in to decide which one it is. Because once you get to 100x, 1,000x is
just
especially if we look about the market cap and the effect that has, it isn't as strong as we think. So that's maybe a couple of weeks, It
could be. It very well could be. The biggest thing is that from what number? It could do a 10,000x from the lowest possible sacrifice rate, which is the dude that sacrificed 25 million. His floor sacrifice rate after bonuses is very different than my floor sacrifice rate.
Yeah.
So when you hear somebody talking about PulseChain can do this many X's, don't get excited. Ask more questions. That's the biggest thing.
What price will it get to? That's the question.
Okay, so what price will it get to? I don't know, a penny.
Yeah, well, that would be good. I'm more bullish than that, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think during the first bull cycle, I think it'll go above a penny for sure. That's I think, yeah. But I love the fact that you're not afraid to give your opinion on that, because again, it is an opinion. But I've heard so many people shy away from, giving their voice to their predictions, because ultimately they are predictions. No one's going to come back, and it's not going to bite you in the ass for telling people you think something will do this and it comes back and you're incorrect. So most of the world being about most things, right? So
exactly. And here's what I would love to have. I would love to have somebody come back to me in 2027, after we've kind of rounded the top of the bull market, we're heading back into the bear, and say, you were wrong. HEX or PulseChain went to 11 cents. You're mad about that?
Yeah. No.
I would much rather be wrong on the low side than wrong on the high side. And that's, people don't like when I give my price estimates, because it doesn't feed into their hopium.
That's a thing too. And that's something that I always try to be aware of. I think as human beings, when presented with, a framework or a structure, a skeleton of something, like I'm even thinking about this with this whole liquidity bonding. This went through my head, where it's like sometimes we do fall into the trap of projecting or forcing our own value propositions onto something, as opposed to thinking about it unbiasedly or thinking about it from a more logical perspective. But I really do think with this liquidity bonding, it doesn't mean that. I think that it is, you can look at this logically and unbiased, and while you obviously hope it's the case, I think it has a very strong way of coming to fruition. But I'm the same as you, man. Like ultimately, I think that I'm very bullish. I think that whether we're going to see X amount of X's versus X amount of X's, it's trending in a very strong direction. It's going to trend, one would assume. You apply a little bit of common sense, experience, education to this, and that whole viewpoint looks very bullish to me. And nobody's going to be right. There are so many variables involved. There are so many ways to analyze this and think about this. You can look at past performances. You can look at the various different ways crypto as a whole is growing and all of that economic energy coming in. The same amount of money in the market right now is going to be way outshone in the future by the amount of money coming in. I think a lot of people tend to fail to recognize even that catalyst. So, it's expected to have, multiples of previous all-time highs with any token that's been around for longer than a cycle. If it's still around, there's no negative kind of connotation with it. There's been no black swan events that have kind of taken it off the board. We're probably going to see, that continue to rise because, it has a utility, it has a focus. And so, yeah, I would agree. And sorry, go ahead.
I mean, there's so many important things to consider. People tend to be very linear thinking, like this product's going to do this because of whatever reason. But you brought up a good point of, how much money is in crypto today? Let's call it $1 trillion. It might be above or below. How much was in crypto at the last bull cycle? What was it? 3 or 4 trillion? How much is going to be in the next bull cycle? I'm going to guess 3 to 4x of that.
You would think so, right?
It could be 9. It could be $12 trillion. So just put the 12 trillion. Let's say 9, because I like to be on the low side of things. Just put a 9 trillion valuation on crypto as a whole. What would that do for everything that exists today? It would do very well, because most things are going to go up with the money that comes into the system. And you talked about the the liquidity bonding, Hart's law, the price of one asset kind of goes up with whatever asset its biggest bonding period is to. So how can we, as investors in PulseChain, how can we catalyze some of its upward movement? Well, instead of providing liquidity in pairs that are stable coins, provide liquidity in a WETH, a wrapped ETH pair.
Yeah.
And then that's going to encourage the price movement because of the bonding of Hart's law. So, I mean, that's a good question. Like the whales, should we be kind of talking to the whales? Like, hey, are you?
They're already talking about this. I think that it's in their best interest too. I think that sometimes they're going to be leading the charge into all these things that we're speculating, and so our buying and selling is not going to be the differentiating factor there. And all the things you mentioned in terms of that Xing, that's not even taking into consideration inflation, right? I mean, we're seeing such inflation rates, so USD value, let alone the rest of the currencies that have done so much worse over the last couple of years. That in itself should be somewhat of a hedge. The stars are aligning for me. I really see this. I see even the delays. The delays are serving a purpose, and I think that while it's frustrating for many to wait, it's almost forcing a lot of those kind of weaker hands that probably put in too much and needed to. It's forcing them to seek other ways, other avenues to take care of their temporary problems, and it may end up saving a bunch of people too. I mean, I heard a lot of people talking about just imagining selling yourself out of those positions prematurely because you're impatient or because you really need the money. You're going to wreck yourself. You're gonna miss out on one of life's silver platters. And I think that I'm very optimistic. I'm very gung ho about this whole thing. And there are so many different things playing in our favor for some real positive price action. And then of course, like you mentioned, like you're doing with Zen and some other projects, and me too. It's important to note there are going to be other opportunities out there. I liken a HEX or a PulseChain to something like a Harry Potter, where it gets like kids interested in reading, and then they start discovering other stories and other. Yeah. And I think this is very, very prevalent too. I think that there are other layer twos that I'm looking at, specifically on Ethereum that I think there's some real, I guess, runway on Ethereum, especially with the structural improvements they're continuing to make. It's not going anywhere, Ethereum. It's going to be around for a long time, and it has really no bearing on how well a PulseChain will do in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So why not look at some of these layer twos? Why not look at other projects that are out there? I know that a lot of people are talking about other PulseChain facilitators like a Icosa or a Hedron, which I'm all in favor of because I'll make the determination if I think I want to get in at certain points, but they facilitate the effectiveness of staking, which obviously is going to remain stable within the HEX ecosystem. And there are so many real cool things and opportunities that are going to be coming to the table in the next couple of months, especially in the years to come. So I'm definitely excited to see what other stuff that we'll all be covering. And it seems like you have very much an open mind to a lot of that too. And as you learn, as we all learn, it's going to be an exciting realm to play in. And I think having a core of some of the stuff we're in now is going to be setting things up for even more perpetuation of wealth. When you make any number of X's through PulseChain, PulseX, HEX, which you can very easily now just by buying HEX, you have more value to play with. And I use that term "playing" because you can be strategic and intelligent with it. But I think that for those watching this now, for those who watch your channel, for those who watch mine, because we're covering the stuff that we believe in right now. And so I think that it really offers an opportunity to change your station in life. I mean, if you can put in a relatively modest amount, which of course is relative to anyone, but then by the time you start seeing some return on that, you're going to have a lot more value, a lot more kind of net worth at your disposal to start making more intelligent strategic decisions. And so I've seen this play out firsthand. I've seen people go to astronomical kind of realms of orbit with their income that they were never close to before quickly.
Think about this. If like you talk about even a little bit of money, somebody might say, well, how does let's say I only have $1,000. How could I turn that into $1 million? I can walk you through just one thing. And of course, it involves some smarts. It involves some doing research and understanding and learning. But it could play out like this. You buy $1,000 worth of HEX today. I don't know what that ends up being. I don't know the price. But let's call it, I don't know, 25,000, what, 20,000, doesn't matter. $1,000 worth of HEX today, PulseChain launches. You get your free PHEX copy. You trade or swap half of that PHEX for PulseChain and you swap the other half for PulseX. Some people will say that's a dumb play. I'm just giving an example. There's 1,000 different ways to do this.
Finding a dumb plan, I think, is going to be tricky because they're all going to amount to various levels of success to me. But yeah, not to cut you off.
So now you have PulseX and Pulse. You can stake your native PulseX, single-sided staking to earn yield in PulseX. You can then play, and this is going to require learning, and I'm going to give a huge caveat warning on here. People are going to screw themselves with liquid loans. I promise you it's going to happen. But if you learn the play, you learn the charts, you learn the cycle of crypto, you can recognize good times to take a small position with liquid loans with a, let's say, 50 to 1, that might even be like 1,000 to 1 even. But if you use liquid loans appropriately, you can increase your position on PulseChain. And as the price goes up, it costs you way less to put that loan back, and can you continue using liquid loans to do that. And by the time it's all said and done, you've earned yield on PulseX. That price appreciation has gone up significantly. You've continued to build your bag on PulseChain. That price appreciation has gone up significantly. You've staked your HEX for a couple of years, whatever, how long that price appreciation has gone up significantly. You can grow a small bag immensely just within the Richard Heart ecosystem, and you can grow that to $1 million. I firmly believe in 3 to 5 years. It's like,
you're absolutely correct, and that compounding effect has a very. I mean, there are so many ways to achieve that, but I think, and it's for the most part, to get that extreme parabolic kind of shift, it's going to take steady price appreciation of the underlying asset, right? Which I think should be a given. But I think I think you're absolutely right there, and I would also say this to a lot of folks out there who, and this is completely normal too, $1 million to most people seems like such an astronomical amount of money to allow themselves to, be available to receive. It's not. It's really not. And there's so much money out there, and it's ridiculous to say, but I think that it's often needed to give this context to a lot of people. $1 million isn't a huge amount of money to so many people in this world. There are people out there with hundreds of millions, billions, like not just, we'll all hear about the billionaire on TV. There are so many people kind of between that 100 million and billion mark in this world. And the amount of money and the amount of people that I know specifically, I'm talking from my own experience, friends of mine making hundreds of millions of dollars because they allowed themselves to get it. And it's often written off when people talk about this in terms of, it's, often like a hippie mentality. Give yourself to the universe and receive. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about setting a much higher bar for your expectations so you don't shit yourself when you start getting to those areas and emotionally trade yourself out of it, because it's very, very doable. And if there's one thing we have learned over the last couple of cycles, it's that those who did hold strong, those who didn't get emotional, didn't sell out of their positions and kind of almost set it and forget it, which seems to be a bit of a taboo term to some folks in the comments, but it really is that type of mentality for something you have conviction in. Reaching those amounts can be very much achieved. You just have to have patience and conviction to achieve them. A lot of people don't, which is why not everyone's a multimillionaire,
It's so much of mindset. Like, I think people really don't understand. You have to be prepared to be wealthy. I mean, the first thing is you have to give yourself permission to have that type of money. And most people hear that and be like, well, that's stupid. Of course I can have that type of money or whatever, but that's so not true. I mean, when you hear people talk, I'll give you an example. I'm staying with my aunt and uncle right now, and they're very, very blessed. I'm staying in a, probably a $3 million house right now. And I went for a walk down the road the other day, and I ran into some guys that had a McLaren out there and a Porsche GT3 RS. And
I think I saw the picture. I think I saw a picture you posted with your son, which was great. I love seeing that.
Started talking to these guys and going to the garage, and we're taking pictures. This guy's got easily $2.5 million just parked in his garage, literally parked because it's in cars. And my son says to me, he's like, Dad, what? I mean, we can't go talk to them. And I'm like, why? We belong here. This is ours. Everything is ours for the taking. We have to give ourselves permission to have it. And until you give yourself permission to have this type of wealth, you're never going to achieve that type of wealth. So the first step is giving yourself permission to have. Don't say stupid stuff like, that would never work out for me. That isn't that's not going to happen in my life. Get rid of that type of crap. Give yourself permission to have. Everything in this world that you want is available for the taking. You just got to go and take it. And a lot of that starts with what's happening right here. You got to be in the right mindset. That's it. Get in the right mindset and then learn. Ask people that are smarter than you. Find people that have done what you hope to achieve and just say, hey, give me a blueprint. And then don't change the damn blueprint. You're not smarter than them.
That's totally agree, Matt. And you know what? That may be a perfect time to end on this. I know that we both have things to run off to, but I couldn't agree with you more. And thoroughly enjoyed having you on, man. I'm glad that we did get a chance to do this, because you are one of the content providers, let's say, that I've had the pleasure of going through your journey with you on YouTube, and it's been great. So I'm hoping this is the start of a lot more to come, hopefully, between us two. And yeah, man, thanks again for coming on. This has been fantastic, and I'm going to stay tuned for all the stuff you're going. I've got to look into some more of these projects too. And for anyone watching this, keep an open mind for any and all new opportunities that are coming that folks like us are touching on, because I think there will be a lot more opportunities. And being on Maxi doesn't necessarily help you if you're missing out on some of the opportunity costs that can be presented as well. So.
Agreed. Well, it's been a pleasure to be on. I'm honored and flattered that you've been following me along my journey. That's fantastic. Hopefully you've learned some things not to do.
I've learned a lot. I've definitely learned a lot.
But yeah, absolutely. We'll be staying in touch. We'll be doing more of this stuff. Ben, thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.